to Tomorrow Never Knows with me, Bob Wilson, and Sir Warren Brown of the Beatles Kingdom. Everybody's got something to hide except for me and my monkeys. My two guests, Charles Rosenay, welcome, and James Lee Stanley, welcome to the show. You guys know our Sir Warren
Thank you for
Brown.
having us.
Thank you.
Welcome, Charles. Welcome, James. Nice to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And we have to remember our sponsor before we do anything further, of course. Beatles Magazine is a publication with 370 plus million visitors in all their pages, read by thousands of fans around the world every day. Beatles news updated daily, 24 hours, audio, video, photos, interviews, even contests, additional materials, and more. Follow Beatles Magazine, the most complete online coverage 24 hours a day, and as the song says, 8 days a week. So Charles and James, welcome to the show. We're glad you're here.
We're delighted to be here.
All right. So,
even though we're miles apart.
Well, it's with the magic of the internet and all these different things, it's like we're right in the same room. But what is it that, Charles, that brings you guys here tonight, especially, aside from saying hello and coming into the Beatles Kingdom? What is it that brings you here tonight? What special events going on?
Well, we're huge Beatle fans, and as you probably know, guys, I've been producing Beatle conventions since the 70s, but my second favorite group of all time was the Monkees. When Sgt. Pepper came out, and I looked on the album as a little kid and didn't see any hits. You know, I was still listening to AM radio in the Bronx in New York and listening to WMCA and WABC and the Good Guys and all that. And I was still, it had to be a hit. It had to be pop music. And the next band that I loved was the Monkees. And grew up listening, of course, to the Beatles and the Monkees as my two favorites. And somewhere down the line in the early 80s, I started producing monkey conventions along with other people. And interestingly enough, the first time a monkey ever appeared at a Monkees convention was at our show in 1982. And that happened to be Mr. Peter Tork. And unfortunately, we lost Peter about a year ago. And we decided we wanted to do a Monkees convention in honor of Peter. And it's in Connecticut, which is where Peter was, most of his family and himself grew up. He loved Connecticut, passed away, unfortunately, in Connecticut. And we're doing it in February, on February 8th, which is the anniversary of his passing, but also his birthday month. So we're both here because James Lee Stanley happens to be our very special guest of honor at the Monkees convention, February 8th in North Haven, Connecticut. And James, maybe you can tell us why we called you to be a guest at a Monkees convention honoring Peter Tork.
Because in 1964, before there were any Monkees, Peter was playing the banjo behind a folk group, and I was working in the nightclub with a fake ID, and Peter came in, and we hit it off, became friends. We played the first open mic there together in 1964, and we've been friends ever since, straight through until last February when he slipped away.
Wow, I didn't even know.
I was the first guy to hire him as Peter Tork because I was playing in Virginia Beach and in 1965, and then the beach closed, and I wanted to have some place to play, so I started a club in Norfolk, Virginia called the Folk Ghetto, and one of the first out-of-town acts I hired was Peter Tork from New York City, and he came down and stayed with my parents, and played the gig, and I filled the room all week long, and this was literally more than a year, maybe 20 months before the Monkees.
Wow.
Yeah.
Bob and Warren, here's something I didn't even know. I didn't even know he knew Peter since 64, pre-Monkees. And I'm going to be interviewing him at the convention. And now I've got something that I just discovered that I never even knew. I knew that they recorded 3 great albums together. I know they played live together. And I knew there was a great symmetry with their music. But I didn't even know that their history dated way back before the Monkees.
Well, I have to sneak a question in about that.
Lifelong friends.
Do you remember what songs you guys played in the beginning?
Album. Back then, I do. One was called the Three Tailors of Lil. which is some kind of folk song that Peter knew that he taught me. And we did Cuckoo, Oh the Cuckoo's a Pretty Bird. You know, we did folk songs. It was 1964, and you know, the Beatles were just killing off folk music, but it was still happening in Virginia, and so we played there. Matter of fact, Peter and I saw A Hard Day's Night together in Virginia Beach at a movie theater on 17th and Atlantic.
Wow, that's really
wow.
And we came out of that movie theater, and we were bouncing off the walls after we saw that thing. It was just amazing.
And who would have thought just a few years later they would be emulating what the Beatles did in their TV show, which was pretty much, you know, a weekly version of A Hard Day's Night.
Exactly. If you check out Help and Hard Day's Night, if you check out those two films, you'll see a lot of things that Peter stole from Ringo and did. I have both of those movies on DVD, of course, and I can see some of the things he did where the two guys would grab on either side and he'd turn his head back and forth and flop his hair, just like Ringo did in Help.
In Help?
Yeah, really,
and
it's just wonderful. And you know what's weird is that I was in the Air Force during the entire Monkees phenomenon, and I was stationed overseas as a Chinese linguist in Taiwan, and I missed the entire Monkees phenomenon here in the States. When I came back, the Monkey show was over, and Peter had left the band, and I was playing McCabe's, and Peter came to the show, and that's how we reconnected. But what's really weird is that I was never around for his phenomenal celebrity. And when I came back, he was teaching school, and we just were friends again. And it wasn't until he passed in February that I actually got in my brain how famous Peter was. Because his entire life he wasn't famous. He was my pal Peter. You know, it was quite an eye opener. I thought, well, I should have taken advantage of that, but I never did. You know.
So when did you guys start picking up the music again after you got back from the Air Force?
Oh, it was decades. Peter was teaching, and then he moved to New York, and he went through some personal trials, and I would stay with him when I was in New York, and then he came back to California, and we hung out a lot. And then one day I said to him, you know, Peter, Mickey and Davey and Michael have all made albums. Why haven't you made a solo album? And he said, well, I've started a couple of things, but I never got around to it. And I said, well, look, I own a recording studio. I have a label with national distribution. Let's do a solo album on you, and we'll shop it to the labels, and if nobody wants to give us what we want for it, we'll put it out on Beachwood. We'll say we can't lose. So I produced his first solo album, and towards the end of the production, he said, James, I don't want to shop it, pal. You've been such a booster of this thing. I just want to put it on your label. So Peter actually signed that first solo album to my label for no advance, just out of friendship. You know,
wow,
he was
great.
The most generous, solid friend I've ever had, man. He would come off the road with the Monkees tour, where they were limousines and people carrying his everything, and then he'd go on a tour with me, and I would rent a Dodge Stratus, and I would drive, and we would share a room, and he demanded that we split the door 50-50, even though both of us were fully aware that the only reason there were people there was because Peter was there, you know. But he was adamant. No, man, we're partners, and it's 50-50. I mean, that's ridiculously generous in show business. It's unheard of, you know.
I just wanted to say one thing you just brought up that I wanted to ask was that I'd heard he was incredibly generous to all his friends. So you already seem to have told us that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. He was one of the best friends I ever had, and he was my lifelong friend. I remember when he called in September and said, James, I'm going off the med. I said, well, what does that mean? He said, well, they're giving me 3 to 9 months, and I hope I make Christmas. And then, you know, and when we talked at Christmas, he said, well, I'm hoping to make my birthday. And he made his birthday, you know.
James, it must have been really exciting to tour with a member of the Monkees, who was also a good friend of yours and a really great person from all that you're saying. Could you tell us a bit what those tours were like as you guys were on the road?
Sure. The fact that we were lifelong buddies and there was a sincere affection there and trust made it a very sweet tour. We never, ever had any real problems. We didn't have the fights. You read about bands breaking up and hating each other and traveling in separate buses and stuff. And Peter and I, the first tour, we just jumped in his Acura and drove across the whole country, just laughing. And as a matter of fact, we broke the timing belt in his Acura just outside of St. Louis. And so we went into an Acura dealership and they said they could fix the car in one day. And I said, well, can we have a room to practice? And I told you before, I didn't realize how famous Peter was. So they give us a room to practice. And it's one of the side showrooms in the car dealership. So he and I get our guitars out. We start playing. In about 20 minutes, we had 200 people jammed into this room and hanging out the windows while we did our very first show together, which was a rehearsal, and the whole thing was like that. We went out there. We stayed with Pete Seeger. We did a benefit for his that river. He does a thing to clean up the Hudson River, and we did that thing. And we just had a wonderful time. It was always fun. And in the beginning, we only went out together because he invited me. He said, I want to do one of those unplugged tours like they're doing on MTV. Why don't you come with me? And I said, all right, I'll be the opening act and we'll hang out. So I went and I said, why don't we do a couple of tunes together? Because I think at the end of the evening, the kids would enjoy seeing us play together after I endear myself to them and they already love you. So that's what happened. We started doing some songs together, and 3 or 4 weeks into the tour, people were saying, how can we buy the album of the two of you? And so when we came off that tour, we went right in the studio and we made an album called Two-Man Band. And it was just the two of us. We turned the machines on and the two of us just played and sang live. And Peter referred to that record as warts and all because it's just us doing what we did. Very spontaneous and very fun. And then we went out and, toured some more behind that. And every single time he was just great to me, He always gave me as much time as I wanted. And the show evolved. It was like me opening and then Peter and then me doing a couple tunes to, by the end of our touring days, we would go on stage together, play a couple of tunes. I'd go get a cup of coffee and he'd do a tune or two. And we just went back and forth and went all evening like that. And everybody seemed to love it. And we made a second album called Once Again that I just listened to because of a film that was looking for some music. And I submitted this thing of Peter's in mind from that album. And it was wonderful to hear it after, more than a decade. And I don't think that I ever realized quite how good we were. It's a wonderful record. And I'm so proud of it. I'm not, I have such a small label. We couldn't spend a lot of money promoting it. But now I'm thinking I want to promote it anyhow because it just came out really good. And Peter shined on it. He wrote some great songs. He sang great, played great. It was just really fun, And then we did a live album where we just turned on the machines again. And for Bob Stain, who started the Ice House in Pasadena, we played for him at his new club called the Coffee Gallery Backstage. And we did I think a 3-hour concert, and we recorded all of it. About an hour and a half of it is on that CD. So we've done all that kind of recording together. And he's also been on most of my solo albums. He's come and played the banjo or sung backgrounds or, played the bass, did something.
So you shared a banjo play with George Harrison because he played on Wonderwall, didn't he?
Yeah, I believe he did. That's right.
So you and George Harrison
so
are the same banjo players.
Yeah. Well, George and I, we go way back.
If you started
George and Peter are playing together again.
You played in '64, and when was the last time you guys got to tour and play together?
Let's see. I think about 2010, 2008. Peter became more and more enamored of the blues. And he put together a little blues band called Shoe Suede Blues. Matter of fact, I produced the first album, and he just kept devoting more and more time to that. And also the band, he had the band on retainer, so that when they weren't touring, he had to pay them anyhow, you know. So I encouraged him to, if he was going to be paying them, to go out and do it. And I have so many projects. I did two albums of acoustic versions of Rolling Stone songs with John Batdorf, and I did an acoustic version of all these Doors songs with Cliff Eberhardt. As a matter of fact, both John Densmore and Robbie Krieger from the Doors played on that record, along with.
I love the Doors. I'd love to hear that. Can we use some of those songs on the show?
Yeah. I will do a little of everything, you know, because I'll be bringing some of my catalog to shamelessly pander, and so I'll definitely be showing them what they are in store for, what they to look forward to.
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to come to the show, or are you not? Are you in Connecticut?
I'm in Florida. If you guys are willing to fly me down, I'll come. If you guys will fly me down, I'm there.
Charles.
You tell Charles Bob will be there, and Warren, just fly him down for the show. But we'd love to put some of your music in. But send us some tracks that we're allowed to use, so we know we can use them, and we'd love to put them in the show. But tell us now,
sure.
with the show you're doing now, you got a new album?
Yeah, I do. I have an album called Without Susie. It's my 35th album, by the way. Wow. And it came out on January the 6th, and we already have about 20-some stations on it. And we're very optimistic about it. But this album is very different in that I moved out of Los Angeles, and I moved up to on top of a mountain about 2.5 hours northeast of Los Angeles, just above the Mojave Desert. But it's a wooded area. It's not a desert area. But in any event, nobody comes by here because it's so inconvenient. So I ended up playing every instrument on the album. I played all the instruments, did all the background vocals, was the engineer. It's the first time I ever just did everything myself. But it came out like a band. Nobody could tell that it was just one guy, you know.
Well, you're multi-talented. But can I ask a question? I'm just curious. How did you come to know Densmore and Krieger that they thought so much of you to play on your record?
You know what? I could tell you that. Hold on one sec.
Yeah.
I after I did the Allwood and Stones record, I was invited to go to a lunch where with Densmore and some other people. And I mean, I didn't know Densmore, but I knew the other people. They said, "Come have lunch." So I brought my book, Riders on the Storm, in the hopes that I could get John to sign it. And I walked up to him, I said, "Hi, James Lee Stanley." And the first words out of Densmore's mouth were, "James Lee Stanley, I love that Allwood and Stones record you did, man." And I was floored. I thought, I couldn't believe that John Densmore even knew I was on the planet, let alone liked what I did. You know, it was thrilling for me, sincerely thrilling. And he said, "Sit down." So we sat down, we had lunch. In the middle of lunch, he says, "You know what, man? If you decide to do the Doors like you did the Stones, I'll play on it." And I said, "Well, I'll hold you to that." And I literally went home and started doing the next record. And then, and John did play on it. And in the middle of recording it, I was on tour again because I have to go in and out, you know. And I was on tour between recording sessions, and my cell phone rang in the dressing room. And it was Robbie Krieger from the Doors. And he said, "Listen, I heard you're doing really good stuff with our songs. And if you want some guitar, I'll play on it." And I said, "Robbie, we'll fit you in." You know? I mean, I didn't know that at all until I did the record. But they loved what I did with their music. So they contributed, you know.
Well, it sounds like you have a million anecdotes.
That's how that happened.
Will you promise to come back on another show and tell us more?
Absolutely, man. Count on it. Yeah, I've got nothing but time. I mean, yes, absolutely. I'll be back on the road next week, actually. And I just recovered from cancer surgery. They're astounded at how fast I healed.
Prayers from here, my friend.
Thank you very much, man. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So you want to let me go then?
Well, I want to ask you, what do you want? We don't want you to go, but we know you have a show coming up in a little while, so I don't want to make it late.
Mm-hmm.
But Could
Okay.
what do you want the fans coming to the convention to come away with when you guys get together? Like, what's in your heart as the show approaches? You know, to remember
That's
Peter
simple
about
enough.
1 year later.
That I just want them to know that that I spent my whole life as one of his best friends, and he never let me down. He was generous and solid, and a beautiful dude. And everything that you know, people that what you saw was what you get. He was the real thing. He was a genuine man, a genuine friend, and sorely missed. Oh, you know what else I wanted to mention? I wanted to mention my website, which is jamesleestanley.com. I wanted to mention allwoodandstones.com, which is the Stones version, and allwoodanddoors.com, which is the Doors thing. And also, I have a free blog. I put about 700 articles up there. Peter wrote some for them too, but what I did was it's just everything that I know about touring and playing and recording and house guesting and booking myself and buying a guitar. It's everything you can think of. And it's called Data Musicata, and you can get there from any of my sites. And it's a free site. You don't have to register. Just go there. If you have any questions about anything, just use the search engine, and there'll be articles about it. There's about 600 or 700 articles up there. And it's
That's
just
great.
Sounds like it's something to see. And tell us about your show tonight. Where are you playing?
Oh, a friend of mine. I'm here in town. A friend of mine has a place, and I go down there when I'm off the road and do a set because, you know, just like Jay Leno goes down to the magic room there in Hermosa Beach and does it once a week, because you got to stay on stage or you get rusty, you know. So when I'm off the road, I always play once or twice a week someplace just to keep my game up. You know?
It sounds like you have quite a good game.
It's called Fiddler's Crossing.
Awesome. That's great. I want you to know it was nice talking to you, and you got some great stories I love to hear more of.
Well, we can do it whenever you like.
I'd make you a deal.
Okay.
James, I got an idea. The next time
Okay.
you come back, if you can get a copy of the Doors one, you did with the Doors, how about if, with your permission, we play each track and you can do a storytellers and tell us about each track? We'd go through the whole thing with you.
Sure. I don't think that would be a problem because I licensed the songs, you know, legitimately to make the recording, and there shouldn't be any problem playing it.
Well, I'd love to do that show and to hear your stories. So, and if you can't do that, would you come on and play live for us sometime?
Yeah. Are you kidding? I'd have to be in Florida, of course, but yes.
Well, you could do, if you have, we can find a way through the magic of radio, or you're definitely welcome to come to Florida.
Oh, well, you know, I have a recording studio, so I think we could certainly make nice sound.
Yes.
You know, what we could do is record it and just send it to you.
Yeah,
so
you
know. So love to do that. That could be 2 shows.
Okay.
One on the Doors and one of your private concerts, and we'll play it from first to last. How about that?
Excellent. So you've got my number. Let's coordinate that in a little while, but not now.
Right.
Well, you go have a great show. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me on. I sure appreciate it.
Have a good night tonight.
Thank you.
Have a great show, and I'm so glad you're healthy again. Bless you.
I'm ready.
Charles, you know, this is such a rich history that you've mined with the Beatles and the Monkees. Mostly you were a Beatles guy. How did you get over into the Monkees?
Well, you know, so pop music, riffs, great choruses, sing-along music, you know, it epitomized the 60s. And nobody did it as great as the Beatles. But if you can see where I'm holding my hand, I've got my hand up to the ceiling with the Beatles. The Monkees is just below it, and then everybody else is below that. So for me, it was always the Beatles were first, the Monkees were second, and there was so much congruity with the two bands. You know, they were friends, they recorded with each other. There was so many things that went on. You know, there's a Monkees song that mentions the Beatles. Peter Tork played banjo on George's Wonderwall album. They wound up doing a commercial with Ringo years later. So there was a lot of crossover with the two bands. But those were the bands I loved forever. And when I was doing the Beatle conventions for so many years, And then I found out there was this little Monkees convention in New Jersey. I wanted to make it bigger. I wanted to make it better. I was kind of a convention professional at that point. And I said, let's bring it to Connecticut. Let's get a major guest. Let's get Peter Tork. And we brought the show to another level. And it continued to be at that level because in 1987, we did what was called the National Monkees Convention. And it had Peter, it had Mickey, it had Davy, and it had their writers, Boyce and Hart. So, you know, it was always my goal, whether it was a Beatles convention, bringing Pete Best or Cynthia Lennon or some amazing guest over, or a Monkees convention, to always to do it as great as it could be. And loving the two bands, that's not hard. When you love what you do and you bring a lot of people joy, it's not work. It's a pleasure.
So you had the conventions going, and then you got into doing the Monkees. But how did you first start out doing conventions?
Boy, that's a good question. So the first conventions that were held were in the mid-'70s in New York and also in Boston. And here I was, this, you know, college kid who was the biggest Beatles fan that I knew of. But I thought, well, if I love them so much and I love conventions so much, why not have one in New Haven, Connecticut? And of course, that was the naivety of the scenario, not knowing what it took. But I sold off, you know, a few of my rare Beatle collectibles because I was a collector from day one. I borrowed some money from my parents and actually put together kind of a decent show with vendors and with, you know, Beatle tribute bands. And in that first year, I learned really what not to do more than what to do. And as the years went by, the conventions grew. And by the 90s, you know, it was as big and as well known as all the other fests and conventions around the world. And we were getting guests that other shows weren't because I was going to Liverpool every summer. I was producing the Beatle tours to London and Liverpool, and I was becoming friends with a lot of the people who had never come over. Sam Leach, the early Beatles promoter, or Norm Rossington, who was in the Hard Day's Night and Help. You know, those are the people that come to mind. So I was bringing over a lot of really great guests. John Lennon's sister, Julia, and they'd never been at any other conventions before. So I sort of had a real great pipeline into bringing over guests. And Davy Jones happened to be a guest at one of our conventions, and he was amazing, and he did a few Beatles songs. And Peter Tork, later on in 2009, was a guest at one of my Beatle expos. And I'll never forget that because he was he lived in Connecticut at the time. He not only came to the convention, but we both appeared on TV stations together to promote the convention. So, you know, he was always a friend. And when he passed, I said, I just got to do a convention to honor him. And that's what we're doing on February 8th in Connecticut.
And like, it sounds like you had, you know, you became close to many people in the Beatles world and the Monkees. Aside from the conventions, have you seen them at shows when you'd been a fan, or did you come to see them through your work?
Both. So in 1986, when the Monkees reunited, I got the inside word that they were rehearsing in a resort hotel, and I actually spent a week with them, playing softball, eating dinner with them, hanging out, playing video games, you know, becoming really close. I had known Peter before that, obviously, but I hadn't known Mickey or Davy, and I thought, wow, this is it. I mean, you know, for a fan, this is the ultimate. Little did I know that a few years later I would get to meet McCartney and spend time with Paul and spend time with Linda. And so as it turned out, I've met all the Monkees. I've worked events where I either interviewed them or used them as in conventions for three of the Monkees, everyone but Nesmith, who I met but never used at any of the conventions. And I fortunately got to meet on different occasions Paul, George in Japan, believe it or not, Ringo at press conferences, and then everybody else pretty much who's ever been associated with the Beatles, whether it's Pete Best or Cynthia Lennon or family members, Mike McCartney. The list is endless. About the only person I never got to meet, of course, was John Lennon.
Good stuff.
But as far as Lennon, though, you said you had his sister on. Is that Julia? What's her name?
Yeah, Julia Baird. She's actually now one of the principals at the Cavern Club in Liverpool. And every summer when we go over, I bring, as you know, I bring Beatle fans over to Liverpool with my company, LiverpoolTours.com. And so we see Julia every year, and we've been close since the mid '80s. We've been close for a long time, and she's a wonderful person, and she keeps, the spirit of John alive. And as did Cynthia. Cynthia was also a wonderful, beautiful person. It was one year we had a convention lineup of her and Cousin Brucey and Joey Molland from Badfinger and May Pang. It was like an Angie McCartney. It was like an all-star convention. That's, I used to strive for that. But yes, I got to know so many of those people, and I've been very blessed being a Beatles convention promoter and someone who brings fans over to Liverpool. And for, 15, 20 years, I also published a magazine on the Beatles in the days before there was internet. So it was called Good Day Sunshine. So through doing all those things, it opened many doors for me.
So you're a jack of all trades, and you're a fairly talented guy, and all these people like you, so it speaks so well of you. If somebody wanted to go over, I'm just curious, like if I wanted to go to Liverpool, how would someone find out that the next tours are coming up, and where can they follow that?
Oh, thanks for asking. Well, so we do the Beatle tour every summer, the end of August, to coincide with Beatle Week. Just like there's Elvis Week in Memphis and Graceland, there's Beatle Week in Liverpool. So what we do is we spend a few days in London, do all the Beatles sites, go to all the historical, panoramic London sightseeing things. Then we stop in Henley, which is George's home, and where his Friar Park Crackerbox Palace mansion was. We pay a respectful visit there, and then we move on to Liverpool. And I mentioned Henley not just because it was George's home, but when you're in London and you're in Liverpool, you're in big cosmopolitan cities. You're in metropolises like New York and LA and Chicago. So when we go to Henley, right in the middle, you're seeing a quaint British town. It's really what, someone would want to experience if they're going to Europe and going to Britain and wanted to see a smaller town. But then we go to Liverpool for a whole week, and we go to the convention there. We go to concerts there. Everything is really built around thousands upon thousands of fans coming over. And that's where we do the tour. We've been doing it since 1983. Really, literally thousands of fans have come over to Liverpool with us with my tour. And we've been honored, thank goodness, by the mayor on several occasions. And we do everything in conjunction with Cavern City Tours, which runs the Cavern, which runs Beatle Week. And we're just, it's great that we're on the inside track with them because we get, all the best tickets to all the best shows and all the events. And we're treated like royalty when we go to the convention and we go to the Beatle Week festivities.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Of course.
I'm going to cut this out, so you don't have to worry about your answer. But how deep do your pockets have to be for this?
It's not ridiculous. For an 11-day tour, and you don't have to cut it out. It's like $29.99 per person, and it's really very reasonable.
You mean $30?
I'll even pay your way, Bob.
$29.99.00.
All right,
any car, any color.
we believe it or not, kept the price the same for like 6-7 years.
Well, the reason why I ask, because this sounds very interesting, and I might have to look into this a little deeper.
Well, you know what? We say you've read about all these places in books your whole life. You've seen the pictures on the postcards, and you've heard about it in the songs. And we go to Strawberry Field and Penny Lane and Abbey Road and the Apple Build. It's just endless. And the Cavern Club, all the places that we've always heard about growing up and dreamed of going. We make those dreams come true for Beatle fans. And there's nothing like going with fellow Beatle fans on these tours, because
Exactly.
not only do you go into like John Lennon's home and Paul McCartney's home, and you probably do a lot of the things on your own, but when you do it with fellow fans, it's a shared experience. It just makes it that much more special.
Yeah, that's cool. And can I ask you, is everything included with that, hotels and all that, or is that separate?
Yeah, hotel, flight. The only thing that's not included, meals and souvenirs. Everything else, well, breakfast is included. So just your
Right.
dinners and souvenirs are not included. Everything
Right.
else is.
Wow, that's really cool. And actually, I think that's a great deal myself. So,
It is.
I'm going to have to look into that. Thank you for that answer. I appreciate it. You
For
can take
sure.
over. You can take over, Bulldog.
Sure. I've dropped in on people to say hello now and then, but I've never dropped in on Paul and Linda. So tell me, you mentioned a bit ago, you just dropped that on us. You hung out with Paul and Linda. Might you go into a little greater detail?
Yeah. Well, I'll preface it by telling you the first time I met Paul was when he began his touring years again, and no one ever thought and now it's commonplace. I mean, he's touring, over and over, and God bless him, he still, rocks the house for 3 hours. But back then, we didn't believe he would ever tour again. And a gentleman by the name of Sam Leach, who used to promote most of their earliest concerts that were not at the Cavern. He would do the Brighton Ballroom. He would do a lot of those outside of Liverpool and around the area promotions. I mean, he booked them once with Little Richard. Sam Leach was a great friend of theirs, a great promoter, and he always said, Charles, you got to bring me over to a Beatles convention. And I said, Sam, I would love to, except you have a bit of a speech impediment, and you got a deep Liverpudlian accent, and I don't think the people will understand you. But I don't care. I'll bring you over. I love you, and I would love you to come over because you have such great stories to tell, and you've written some amazing books. And he said, well, if you ever bring me over, I'll pay you back, and I'll get you to meet Paul McCartney. And I said, oh, sure you will. I'm sure that'll happen. And I didn't care. I just wanted to bring him over. And we brought him over, and I interviewed him at the conventions and pretty much, asked the questions, and then whatever he answered, I don't want to say translate it, but I would then repeat it so that everyone understood what he was saying. Well, come jump ahead to Paul is playing all of a sudden at the NEC in Birmingham, England, which is not that far from Liverpool. And Sam says, Charles, remember I promised if you ever brought me over, I would introduce you to Paul. And I go, yeah. And on this transatlantic call, he says, well, I'm bringing my daughter and I'm bringing you. Now, would you believe in those days, I was bringing over groups to Liverpool already for the regular tour. We did a separate tour just to see McCartney because no one thought he would come to America. No one knew if he would ever tour again. So we brought about 50 or 100 people over that year, and we went to see him in Birmingham. And sure enough, Sam Leach brought me backstage. And we didn't believe that Paul would come out because it was already time for the show to start. And we're in the green room, and we're with Vera, Chuck, and Dave, and we're with brother Mike and Auntie Jin and all the people that Paul ever sang about from his family who are greeting him and hugging him. And he walks in the room, and then he sees Sam, and he runs over and hugs Sam. And he sees Sam Leach's daughter, and he hugs her. And he sort of says, who's this guy? And Sam goes, well, this is Charles Rosenay. He publishes a Beatles magazine called Good Day Sunshine. Paul goes, oh, good title, that. And then he said, and Charles does the Beatle conventions in the States. Oh, very cool. And Charles also does Beatle tours to Liverpool. And he goes, oh, cool, man. When do I get the royalties? And that was the funniest line because no matter how nervous I was then, it sort of melted away just by him being so sweet and human and down to earth. And I still fumbled out something like, Paul, you have no idea what your music has meant to me and everyone I know and blah, 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 which I guess he heard it a million times, but I had to say it. And we came in to contact many other times after that. And I actually got friendlier with Linda because she would remember me sending her copies of Good Day Sunshine to her and Paul. And she would always say, oh, yes, you're from Connecticut. I'm from Scarsdale. We always remember each other. And that was just amazing that she would remember that and be so sweet and all that. So my great memories are of Linda and, of course, of Paul at press conferences, backstage, at a dinner once, and just so many great occasions.
Well, you indeed are a blessed man. I concur. So what about Ringo and Barbara? Have you been out to dinner with them too?
Not for dinner. I've been to art galleries where I took pictures of Ringo and Barbara. I've been to press conferences where I asked questions and took photos. I've been to too many, more than I could count, all-star band concerts. And I've had the pleasure of asking them questions on the Phil Donahue show and in another situation. I'll tell you the funniest non-meeting.
What did you ask him?
I asked him about his grandkids, and he loved that question. He was very happy that it was not a Beatles question, and that if you play it again and you rewind the show, you'll see that I asked him about his grandkids, and he was very delighted to answer it. Yeah.
Cool.
But I'll tell you the funniest story about a Ringo scenario was I was producing BeatleCon in Detroit. I didn't just do the shows in Connecticut. I did them in Boston, and I did Seattle. I did a lot of other cities, even Japan, where I was producing conventions at the time. And we were in Detroit, and we had just finished the convention, and we timed it because Ringo was playing that weekend, and we thought, by some miracle he'll come visit, which of course he didn't because our guest was Pete Best. And that would probably be the last place Ringo would want to show up, is at a place where Pete Best was the Beatles convention guest. But anyway, we're at the airport, and I'm ready to leave. And all of a sudden, David Fishoff, the promoter, and some of the band, and there's Ringo 1 foot away from me. And I'm wearing a jacket and a T-shirt, and I'm ready to say, "Hey, Ring," and I stop myself, because on my shirt, I am wearing a Pete Best shirt. And I said, I cannot say hello to Ringo in an airport wearing a Pete Best shirt. So that's one of the funny stories of the non-meeting as opposed to a meeting.
Yeah, that's cool. Can I shoot another question in here?
Yeah.
All right. You said you met Yoko, and Bulldog, I'm going to ask this question. You said you met Yoko. What kind of woman is she, or was she to you? And because, people's got a bad, she's got a bad reputation with Beatle fans. And I just like to get your opinion on her. If it's not a good one and you don't want to answer, that's fine. I just want to get your opinion on it.
It's a very fair question, and instead of answering my opinion about Yoko, I'll tell you my favorite Yoko story, and that was, I'm being very diplomatic here. There was a place called the Schubert Theater, which is still around in downtown New Haven, and I was a representative when Yoko had an John Lennon art exhibit there. Mm-hmm. And I was, being one of the ambassadors, I just welcomed people. I was maybe like a concierge, like a VIP valet. I was there because they knew I was a huge Beatles fan, because I was a local yokel in the town. And anyway, what happened was she was very busy meeting not celebrities, but high rollers and people who might be buying artwork. And Sean was there, and Sean was only about 5 years old at the time.
Yeah, cool.
And I don't know how it transitioned, but somehow I became Sean's babysitter for the day. And it was great. I loved it. He was a sweet kid, a brilliant kid. And what I had with me was some issues of Good Day Sunshine, which had John in it, of course, but also Yoko. And I was able to get photos of me hanging out with Sean as this little kid, looking through pages of Good Day Sunshine, of probably photos of his dad and of Yoko that he'd never seen. And I think I had a better connection with him than I did Yoko, because she was very, very business-minded, and she was very... she had a purpose for being there, and I didn't get to really socialize with her as much as I would have. Met on other occasions, and she was, for years we exchanged holiday cards. So I don't have really a bad thing to say about Yoko. as a person in regards with me at all.
Well, very good and fair answer, and I appreciate that. And do you have any pictures of you and Sean and that time?
I do. I have tons of pictures of me with Paul, and with Linda, and with George Martin, and with Sean from there. What I don't have a picture with is when I met George Harrison, which was very, very cosmic, very coincidental, very serendipitous. We had brought a group of about 40 fans to Tokyo, where he was doing 3 concerts in Japan. And we did a 1-week tour where we went to the Tokyo Dome, the Budokan. We went to the Beatles Museum in Japan. We went to the Beatles Collector Shop in Tokyo. We did all Beatle things. But the highlight of it is we spent 3 nights at George's concerts where he played with Eric Clapton and the band.
Yeah.
And
cool.
as fate would have it, we were on the same time schedule for meeting at the airport when he was flying back to England and we were flying back to the States, and we got to hang out in the VIP executive lounge with him. Some of us got his autograph. Some of us, had him sign ticket stubs and flight pass and the flight, boarding passes. But none of us took pictures with him, but we took pictures of him, and that was that was amazing.
Yeah, I can imagine. You've been around pretty good company there, and if you have any of them photos, if you send them to Bob, I can put them in on this show if you would like.
I sure will. I'll do that so you can incorporate it. Definitely.
Awesome. That sounds good to me. All right, Bulldog, go ahead.
Well, you just blew me away. Wow. I mean, we've had a ton of guests, and I've never been speechless before. So I applaud you. Wow.
I know we started off talking about Monkees conventions, and then it led into all my great Beatle close encounters.
Hey, look, I'm one of the biggest Beatle fans you'll ever find, and whenever I can talk to someone that met the Beatles, you put me in heaven. So I can go on and talk hours to you about all this. I think
I'm glad you appreciate it as a fellow fan, because that's how I present it. I know that I hope it doesn't ever, God forbid, come off as bragging, because I'm not. I'm saying how blessed and how amazing it was that I had these opportunities. I wish every one of the listeners and every fan could meet the people they grew up loving and have as good experiences as I did. And, I wouldn't say I was friends with any of the Beatles, but I knew them, on occasions and got to meet them. I was close friends with Davy Jones of the Monkees, who passed, and I was close with Peter Tork as well. Even though I might have taken more pictures and seen Mickey in concert more. But, if these are my 2 dream bands from when I was a kid, and I've been very blessed to have opportunities to have close encounters with them and produce conventions in honor of them. And that's why I'm so excited that on Saturday, February 8th, we're having the tribute to Peter Tork on the 1-year anniversary of his passing in North Haven, Connecticut at the Best Western Hotel. And if fans want information on that, they can just visit www.monkeesfanconvention.com. And if they want to come on any of the Beatle tours, we do it every single August. It'll going on almost 40 years. And that's www.liverpooltours.com.
Great deal. And I don't take it as you bragging, because if I was in your position, I would be talking to everyone about it. And I don't look at it as bragging. You've been, you met some great people and some famous people, and you got a right to talk about it. And it's awesome to listen to your stories.
Thank you. The funniest thing is the most time I spent with Paul, where I got the most autographs, took the most pictures, took video, which is on my Facebook, was totally separate from my magazine or conventions. Or a friend of mine actually won a contest on MTV called A Dinner with Paul McCartney, and I guess there were winners from 5 or 6 different MTV in different countries. And
Wow.
she said, Charles, do you want to go? And I go, well, I've met Paul. And I said, if you have a friend who has never met him and you want to bring him, she goes, no, I'll love it more because you'll come to London with me. We'll have dinner with him, and it'll be so special. Let me tell you, thank goodness that she insisted that I go, because that's when I spent the most time with Paul and Linda. At the time I was publishing Good Day Sunshine, it was our 10th anniversary. And we were putting out a cassette edition for the 10th anniversary. And I had people sending in messages like, those were cassettes in those days.
What is a cassette? Hey, look, I'm old enough to know.
No, that's funny you would point it out, because before us there was a magazine called Strawberry Fields Forever out of Boston, published by a pioneer by the name of Joe Pope. It was great, and once a year or whenever he would do a flexi disc. Remember those plastic flexi discs? And he would put that out as the Christmas issue. So we followed suit, and we would put out a Christmas cassette. And on this 10th anniversary, I solicited so many people to send in their messages. And I got Richie Havens, and I got Tony Sheridan, and I can't even remember. All these are great people. But the best part of it was I got all the members of Paul's band. I got Linda and I got Paul to say, congratulations, hello to all the members on your 10th anniversary. So that was great. And it was all because of my friend Stacy, who won the contest on MTV and not dragged me along, but gave me the honor of accompanying her on the trip and on the vacation and on the opportunity to meet with Paul again.
Yeah, that's really cool. I got one more question, and then Bulldog's part of the show too, so I'm going to let him bark. I'm going to let him bark for a while. He's back there growling, and I can hear him. So, one more question. You said you sold some of your collectibles. Can I ask you what collectibles you were selling?
Yeah. So, when I started doing the Beatle conventions in 77, 78, I had been collecting from day one. My parents were really great about buying me the stuff and not throwing it out, as a lot of parents did. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I had a collection. And the thing that I remember selling at the time, which paid for the hotel, was the Beatles Butcher cover. Fortunately, I've replaced it. I've replaced it.
But God.
It's worth thousands now, and I think I only got a few hundred for it then. But it did indeed pay for the hotel.
Well, that's the ultimate Beatles collectible there. And and I actually have 4 of them, I believe. So
wow.
Yeah, but if you were to sell that, I'd definitely be in the market for that. But anyway, I'm going to let the Bulldog take over, and I'm going to keep quiet for a little while. I've said enough, and I appreciate all your answers.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to say your stories don't come off as bragging at all. I think I really enjoyed them, and I guess your heart for it is why. I'm just happy you met them. I was thinking, I'm listening to this. Why am I not jealous? It seems like you're a good-hearted guy, and I'm glad you got to meet those people. I think that's really so cool. But now, if somebody wants to go, you've given your contact information. But suppose they want to find you easily, like on Facebook, where would they look?
So for the tours, they can search Liverpool Tours. For me personally, Charles Rosenay, Rosenay, and we're doing an event in October called Imagine 80, it's on the same day as John would have turned 80. They can search Remember Lennon or Imagine 80, and that'll probably come up. But hopefully we can do another show before then and talk about that. Constantly doing fun stuff. I do things that I, as a fan, would want to attend. And I do things out of love, and hopefully I make a few dollars on it. But if I don't, it's okay too. I do other things in life. I run a DJ company. I do some acting. I've been very, very blessed. Everything I do not only brings me joy, but fortunately brings others as well. So I have a lot of great events coming up, and if people want to contact me, I'm very accessible. I'm on Facebook, and all the websites have all my phone numbers, and I'm very easily reached.
And I just want to ask, I took a quick look before the show at your acting chops. Can you name some of the movies you were in?
Well, I'm a big horror fan and a rock and roll fan, so I'm very picky and love, those type of things. And a lot of horror movies I won't mention, but the music ones I'm proud of is I got to be an extra in the film Shine a Light, which is the Rolling Stones film that Martin Scorsese put together and directed. And if you watch that till the end, when the Stones come off stage at the Beacon Theater, I am the person who actually puts a robe on Ron Wood as they run off stage and run out. So that's pretty cool. My other favorite role was in a HBO show, which you may or may not have heard, called Flight of the Conchords, which was on for a couple seasons. These two guys who were very funny from down under, and there was one episode where they happened to be doing a tribute to Simon and Garfunkel. Art Garfunkel's actually in the episode. And there's two Elton John imitators. One is Patton Oswalt, the comedian, the funny actor, and the other one is me. And the premise is that he's upset because there's all these tribute artists, and they got two Elton Johns, and I sort of stalk him in the episode. The episode is called Prime Minister. It was in the second season of Flight of the Conchords on HBO, and you can see me as Elton John. So those are the few of the ones that I'm really most proud of.
Well, with that and Phil Donahue, I got something to watch now until the next time you come on. So before you do your John Lennon 80th birthday, you come back and visit us?
I would love to do that. I'm enjoying talking to you guys, and I feel that that we've known each other for years, and we share just so many great Beatle feelings and memories.
And I just want, on a serious note, when James Lee Stanley was talking, he just told us that something I didn't know. He said he survived cancer. So I just want to dedicate the show to all the cancer survivors, and I'm so glad that he's well. And I was glad he shared that with us because I didn't know that. So I'm glad we met two nice people tonight, and I thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you. We've been trying to get James Lee Stanley to be the special guest at our Monkees convention, and he just didn't think he could. And thank God he can, because he said, Charles, I'm well enough to come, and I want to pay tribute to Peter Tork. So thank you for mentioning that. He's a great guy, great musician, and just, one of the world's, if you talk about, undiscovered superstars, he's like one of the best kept secrets, James Lee Stanley, for sure.
And I want to mention his documentary because he said before the show he's making one. So the next time he comes on, he'll tell us about the documentary. But my prayers go up that he stays healthy. I was so happy to hear that. And I thank you. And Sir Warren, what do you have to say?
I thank you very much, and I very so enjoyed this conversation. I could sit here for hours and talk to you. Unfortunately, we can't do that right now, but I sure would like to talk to you again, and I would appreciate if you come back on.
I will look forward to it. It's my honor. I loved every second of it. I so appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to doing it again, my friends.
Yeah, I thank you very much.